how do we interpret this? We interpret this passage in the context of what? Of the verse that follows it, which is this, verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave Himself up for it. Do you know, one time I told someone that I as a young man, I was young and I went to this big missions conference. I wasn't invited. I just showed up and I'd been back from Peru, been there for a couple years, and I showed up in this missions conference, and I don't know why. There's like 700, 800 men there, but the guy heading the thing up said, "Are you Paul Washer?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "Well, someone told me something about this. I would like you to come up and speak for us." I mean, you talk about paralyzed. I was afraid. And then I got up in the pulpit and I turned around, I looked down, and Ian Murray is looking back at me. Then I was very afraid. And I was telling a friend of mine this story, and he immediately said, "You should not be afraid to preach before men. You stand before God." And I said, "Yeah, of course I do, but God's a lot more merciful than men are." Do you know, I am not afraid. I'm afraid to rebel against the Lord. I am not afraid to submit my life totally to Him, because I know He's trustworthy. I'm not afraid. Even if I have to lay down my life, if I have to walk away from house or home or family or whatever I have to do, I'm not afraid to do that. If He asks me, "Come and die," it's really not that big of an issue. Why? Because of His character, because of who He is. And so when the Lord says, "Submit to me, Paul," what's so hard about submitting to a perfect master who loves you more than you love yourself? That's the context of this passage commanding women to submit to their husbands. I would be afraid that there's a real way in which I think my wife is a brave woman, because I would be afraid to submit to someone like me. You know those passages that we take to heart when the Lord says, the master of the house went away and the one He placed over the servants begins to beat them and not give them their food, and He comes back and deals harshly, cuts them to pieces, He does. Look at that in the context of marriage. And these are not servants, these are daughters. These are daughters. Yes, this woman of God, she has her problems, but this is not a conference about her, it's about you. This is a daughter of God who, yes, she must submit. She's been commanded to submit to you. But you have been commanded to love her as Christ loves the church. And if she does not submit to you, then you have very little to be afraid. She's a rebellious woman. If she submits to you, be afraid. You have a sword hanging over you. If this woman gives herself unto you and treats you as her head, and you do not live up to that role, you abuse that role, you use it for your own advantage or for your ministry, and be terrified. Because she always will be a person just like you before the throne of God. Blood was spilt on Calvary for her. Let me just listen. Okay, I'll tell you where it's at, but just listen to this. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone, and in that stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saving he that receiveth it. And you say, what that have to do with marriage? Is this referring only to men, or is this referring to all the people of God? It's referring to all the people of God. Anyone who overcomes. Your wife is not an extension of you. She is her own person before the throne of God. And one day, a white stone will be placed in her hand. with a name written on it that you, sir, do not know. She knows it, and her Lord knows it, but you do not know it. Do you see what I'm saying? You're not connected to everything. You're not the Lord of Lords of her world. She does not only find value before the throne because she's married to you. She is a daughter of God by her own right, and by the right of the blood given for her. You have been called to be her head, but do so with fear and trembling. Now, it says, back to Ephesians 5, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. That statement is ferocious. I mean, that statement is so cutting. It has such a blade on it. That my wife is to submit to me as she would submit to the very Lord of glory. You say, boy, that ought to be a frightful thing for her. No, it's not. It's a frightful thing for me. Look what I can do. In Peru, I was with a pastor from the jungle once. He used an illustration of a man in a family who is not submitted totally to the will of God and the fear of the Lord. Is like a man driving drunken wildly down the Amazon with his entire family in the back of the boat loaded with dynamite. It's true. Do you realize the responsibility that has been placed upon you?